So hi everyone. Hope you guys are well. My name is Joseph Alam. I'm the Deputy Country Manager for StashAway Milan. And today we actually have quite an interesting topic we want to bring you as part of our Money Chat series. For the new joiners, I like to call this a show. So welcome to the show. So it's a topic that is not really on everybody's feed. It's a very important topic, but not being spoke about quite often. And I take it very dear to my heart as well, this one in particular. And it's about how should parents teach their kids and educate their children about the importance of money management, money savings to benefit themselves for later on, because obviously kids and teenagers are the leaders of the future. So how to get them prepared from early stages. And to do so, we have two amazing speakers that have joined us today. First of all, please welcome Marilyn Pinto, who's the founder of KFI Global. Hi, Marilyn, how are you?
Hi, thank you for having me, Joseph. Really glad to be here.
Great. Would you mind introducing yourself and a bit about KFI to the audience?
Okay, let me do this in a different way. I'd like you to imagine that you were 15 again. And judging by the smile, that was an interesting time in your life. Okay, so I'd like you to imagine that you were 15 again and everything's exactly the way you remember it. Okay, you live in the same house, you go to the same school, you even hang out with the same bunch of friends. Nothing's changed, except for one thing. You now know and understand how money works. You know how to save, you know how to spend wisely, you know the importance of investing early. You know how to make smart money decisions. You even know how to avoid making stupid ones. I'd like you to consider what a difference this would have made to the financial trajectory of your life. I mean, keep aside financial trajectory. Imagine the impact it would have made in every aspect of your life. And now imagine giving that chance or that opportunity to a youngster in your life. Yeah. My name is Marilyn Pinto. I'm the founder of KFI Global. We're an education company that specializes in teaching teens how to make smarter money decisions. Thanks to us, over 3,500 teens now make smarter money decisions and are setting themselves up for a financially secure future. We're on a mission to bring this education to more teens across the globe because we firmly believe that this critical life skill is important for them to step up, play full out, and live a life on their own terms. And that's our promise: smarter, richer, braver teens, because that's what the world needs.
Very cool. Thanks, Marilyn. So maybe let me introduce myself. My name is Ramzi. I'm the general manager for StashAway MENA based in Dubai. So excuse the sweater, but because of COVID travel, my return to Dubai has been disrupted. And so it's just a little bit colder here than it is in Dubai. So it's not that the AC is on full blast. But yeah, so maybe a quick note about StashAway. So we're a digital wealth manager, or what's more commonly known as a robo-advisor. So the whole idea with us is that we kind of take investing and simplify it, make it more transparent, make it more accessible, make it more affordable, and then provide kind of the average person with access to a sophisticated investment framework that they otherwise would not have access to, which is usually typically kind of safeguarded for more institutional or high net worth individuals, which most people are not. And so that's kind of the idea here. So to educate also and kind of bring this awareness to the masses, obviously with Marilyn trying to get that done at an earlier stage, because it really is never too early to start investing. Actually, the earlier you do start, the better. And that's due to the benefit of compounding, which most people tend to kind of ignore, at least for the first maybe like 10 or 15 years of their adult lives.
Thanks a lot, Ramzi. And I have to say, honestly, Marilyn, I got a bit of goosebumps while you gave that introduction. And it took me back to my 15th, although I shaved this morning, so I do look like a 15-year-old.
You do.
But I'm not.
It wasn't a very far journey for you, I thought.
Well, again, thanks for both of you to be with us today here, and obviously sharing your expertise about that topic. So I would like to start with you, Marilyn, and it's a question that we ask all our guest speakers on the show. What was the gap that you found in the market that enabled you or triggered you to launch KFI?
Well, it wasn't the gap in the market that triggered me. It was a gap at home in my family with my daughters. Even though they were academically quite smart, I saw a gap, it was more like a huge gaping hole in their knowledge of money. They were so clueless about it. And the more I looked into it, I realized that this wasn't their fault. It wasn't something that's taught in the education system. It isn't something we particularly spoke about or focused on at home in any meaningful way. And what was worse is that it wasn't specific to them. It was most kids had the same issue. They had no clue about money, how it worked, what to do about it, how to think about it, more importantly. And I thought that was such a shame because I think this is a critical life skill and it should be taught early on. And that's in essence how KFI got started. It's a labor of love, not just for my kids, but for, I guess, any kids who'd like to learn about money.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the right approach. And as you mentioned, any kind of education starts at home. And that's why it's very important for the parents to equip themselves with the right knowledge to pass it on to their children.
Yeah, that's true. Also, if I can just say one more thing, I wasn't looking to start a company. I was actually looking for a program to enroll my kids into. That's what I wanted to do. But I was very exacting in my standards, and everything out there came up really way short. And I guess I was looking for a program that was more holistic, very thoughtful and intelligent way of teaching kids. And it wasn't out there. So that was the impetus, if ever, to start the company.
Interesting. And Ramzi, you have two very beautiful daughters. Obviously, they're quite young. But according to you, how big of a role can a parent play in building that education, that financial education for their children? Because we mentioned that education starts at home, and very, very crucial for that, that first step, that first kind of kick starts from the parents.
Yeah, so I think the unfortunate reality is for most people, that's where they're going to get the bulk of their kind of, let's call it informal financial education, right? So in schools, in universities, they really don't teach that almost no matter what you study. Even if you study business or finance, you're learning more about kind of institutional business finance, portfolio management from a much more technical level as opposed to managing personal finance. And so whether it's kind of good or bad habits, you're really learning that from your parents. And it starts from an early age, whether you realize it or not. Just even your views on kind of money habits, investing, saving, whether you feel that you have enough or you don't have enough, if something is expensive or affordable. So just kind of repeating those phrases, and that kind of sticks with your children a lot and helps build their habits over time, whether you realize it or not.
Interesting. And what about you, Marilyn? How do you think parents can play a role?
I think it's a very crucial role, a very pivotal role. But I'd like to take a different aspect as well, if I may. Parents do play a very important role, and something for a long time that I think parents delude themselves into thinking that this is something that schools do, and for the longest time, I think for years and for decades now, there's this educational football being played that parents think the schools are doing it, the school thinks it's not my responsibility, we don't have the time or the resources, it's the parents' responsibility. I think the losers in all that are our kids, because they are the ones who are growing up not knowing, not getting this crucial information, and having to grow up and navigate life without it. And as we know, that isn't something that's pleasant to do or financially beneficial to do. So I think it's really important for parents to acknowledge that responsibility. And, academic change is glacial. It's going to happen. We don't know when. In the meanwhile, we can't afford to let one more generation grow up without this knowledge. A lot of us have done that. And that's the other part. Most parents haven't had a course in financial education. It wasn't even a thing when we were growing up, right? And therein lies a problem, because we don't realize or recognize our own lack of education in that topic. So it's very difficult to teach kids something that we don't know, that we haven't learned formally. I think another problem there is something I call proximity bias. We're too close to our kids for them to actually learn anything. Ramsey, I'm sure you're different because your kids are younger, but I think as they grow older, you will begin to realize that parents are the last people that that most kids listen to. It's not cool if it's coming from your parents. And I mean, I've seen this with my own kids. I know I teach thousands of other kids, but my own kids, I need to put them through a class and a program and a different teacher. And you'll see them come back and say, oh my goodness, this is what we learned today. And I'll go like, you had no reaction. I told you the same thing at home. It was absolutely deadpan. But it's not just me. I realized that because we have so many people who are very high up in the financial industry who send their kids to us. I thought it was just me initially. And I asked them, I was like, how come you guys are sending your kids to us? You guys do this for a living. They're like, well, we wouldn't need to if our kids listen to us. So it's a proximity bias. It is tough. As much as we try, there's a limit to what we can do, but that shouldn't stop us from actually trying and acknowledging the responsibility of getting them the help when they need it.
Interesting. No, that's exactly true. If I'm thinking back to when I was 15, like you asked at the beginning, that's like a lot of it is. Yeah. Now I think, oh, I wish I listened to my parents when they told me this, or I wish I listened to them when they told me that. I would have learned more about this.
But that wisdom only comes with age, unfortunately.
Exactly.
100%. And I'm not trying to be or try to play the devil's advocate, but some people, parents, do not have the proper kind of education to pass it on to their children. And even though they know they have, sometimes they do make mistakes, right? Maybe unintentional mistakes.
No, that's very true.
Parents want to do an intentional mistake to their children.
A deliberate mistake. Yeah, that's very true. And I think parents we have our own biases with regard to money. We have our own, which at best are unhelpful, at worst are detrimental when we pass them on to our kids. So it's like we said, we don't have the formal education to teach this. So just like I think you wouldn't teach your own kids how to drive because you might know to drive, but do you really do your shoulder checks? Do you really put your lights on? There's all of these things, and we don't want to teach them the wrong way. We should ensure that when our kids learn, they're learning the right way. And I think that's where experts come in and professional education actually comes in.
100%. And according to both of you, I'll start with you, Marilyn. What are the most typical mistakes, obviously unintentional ones, that parents do while teaching their children about money management?
Well, for one, I think parents don't realize the importance of an early start. A lot of parents think that my kids are too young. Some parents even might think my kids are too old. He's 17 or he's 19. I don't think it's not important now. They're studying business or they're doing economics. But as you both mentioned before, college does not teach you that, irrespective of what subject you study. Over there, it's mainly corporate finance. And we recently did a program for students of a university here. They were third-year students in studying business and accounting. And when they came for the program, they thought, oh, this is going to be boring because we know this, and it's just going to be a breeze if it's not boring. And they were shocked by the end of the program. I'm saying shocked because I think they realized that they could have so easily have gone through life without knowing this. And they realized the cost of that. They realized how difficult it would have been, what the actual dollar cost is of not knowing how to manage your money. So yeah, I think that typically states very well how important it is.
What about you, Ramsey? I don't know. I'm sure you haven't done any mistakes yet because you haven't started, but what would you say would be a mistake that a parent would do while teaching his kids?
So I think the mistake that parents can do is because, like we said earlier, vast majority of people don't have this formal education. So you want them to learn about it because you don't know about it, but you end up teaching them or focusing on maybe the things that are either wrong or not as important or not the right place to start, because then it just confuses things a bit. So maybe the solution doesn't necessarily need to be like a formal, proper kind of full-on program or education necessarily. Maybe it depends on the age, and you should go through that at some point for sure. But I think that's kind of like the key mistake, and that's a shortfall. So I saw a joke or a meme online, I think a week or two ago, and someone was saying I was trying to teach my kid about the concept of delayed gratification. So he told his toddler, this is like a nursery school toddler, I don't know how true this is, but it was just something I saw online. I'll give you one gummy bear now before school starts, or if you wait until you get home, I'll give you 2 gummy bears. And so the kid chose 2 gummy bears, and then the father just ate the gummy bear. And then his friend asked him, why are you doing that? He's like, well, I need to teach him about risk and volatility, right?
Yeah.
So
and
I
life's
think that
unfair.
might have been too advanced of a concept for someone that age, but I'm sure it was a joke. But that's where you kind of like tend to kind of start to lose things when you're not kind of going things in the right order or the right focus. And then there's a very big difference between saying something and them also experiencing it. So kids obviously learn a lot more from their own experiences. And so if you can have them make those mistakes earlier on, and they learn from it, which is of course the most important thing, that you're learning, whatever it is, then they can start to see that benefit a lot quicker.
And if there's something else, if I might add, Joseph, I think one very common mistake we see is parents tend to focus a lot more on tactics rather than strategy. So they tend to focus on the fact that, I'm giving my kid an allowance, or my kid has a credit card or a debit card, or is using a budgeting app, and therefore they know about money, but they don't. That doesn't mean anything. These are just tactics. As Tony Robbins says, 80% of any skill is up here. It's your mindset. And I think we should focus more on developing their mindset and behavior, because, I've had kids in my class, they've had, platinum credit cards and have no clue about how a credit card works, no clue about fees and charges, had never seen a statement in their life, don't know at all they don't know the difference between a debit and a credit card. And you're looking at older teens here. So we assume that they know this, but I think a lot of those assumptions aren't based on facts. So I think the even budgeting apps, budgeting apps work, but they work for people who are already financially savvy. They don't work for kids who have no idea, because if you're asking them to track their expenses, they're tracking every single dirham they're spending on Fortnite and on Fortnite merch. But does that really mean that they are, that they're financially savvy? Of course not. So I think by focusing more on tactics rather than strategy is one of the key mistakes that is quite helpful to recognize and correct early on.
And then you need to, sorry, Joseph, you need to also, to continue with that, to see things full circle as well. So it's not just tracking your expenses, it's how are those tracking relative to your, well, let's say your income or your allowance, whatever it is. And then what are the consequences if you do spend more or if you go over budget? So it's not mom and dad are just going to pay my credit card bill at the end of the month anyway, which probably is what will happen.
Which is what is happening at this point.
Exactly. But what does that mean for you next month? So your X dirhams or X dollars is now going to be reduced, plus the penalties and fees and interest, and that's how they can start. So maybe they think it's unfair, but you need to learn the hard way also.
Yeah, I think learning about money is a lot more nuanced than just an app or just a credit or a debit card. And I think you're required to give them that kind of information in a way that makes sense to them and in a way that actually impacts their behavior, because just knowledge for some reason, it doesn't really make sense. We all know we should be doing particular things, but we don't actually do them. So we have to give it to them in a way that actually impacts their behavior. And that is what makes the big difference. That's what actually moves the needle. And that's why it's important.
Yeah. And speaking about that allowance that the parent will give to their children, I know you don't really like that question, Marilyn, but a lot of people would like to know how much of an allowance would a parent should give to their children.
Well, the reason I say I don't like that question is just because, again, it's tactical. I'd rather parents focus on a lot more strategic items, but also there is no evidence to prove that to prove it either way, to show that kids with an allowance actually are financially smarter than kids with there is no evidence to prove that, but. And it really depends on what, but I think what I can give you is I can give you maybe some guidelines around allowance. If you are giving an allowance, then, some guidelines around it, if I can do that, right? So the first thing is to don't link allowance to chores, because I think that is a big mistake that a lot of parents tend to make. We tend to link it to chores, but kids need to understand that that's their responsibility. It's part of being a part of belonging to a family unit. So, for example, don't give them chores to clean up their room. But if they're doing something over and above, then yes, for example, my own kids, when we have a dog, and if they groom the dog and give the dog a shower, then that's outside of they don't get paid to walk the dog or to feed him, but they do get paid when they do the grooming for him, because that is over and above something. So I think that makes sense. That makes sense to don't link it to chores. Be very clear about what the allowance is for. sort of don't just leave it very vague, because then they don't really know, are they supposed to spend it on that? Be very clear about what you're giving them the allowance for, what they're allowed to spend it on. If for example, junk food isn't allowed in your house, that doesn't mean just because you're giving them an allowance, they can go out and buy junk food. So you've got to be very clear, about that. The other thing is to be consistent when you're doing it. As parents, I know it started with me as well. I remember sometimes, and then I don't have the cash, and I'll say, I'll give it to you later. And it really pays to be consistent, because that's when the real learning happens. Also with kids, I know that this might be a bit controversial, but I think giving them cash actually makes a big difference, because with cash, it's more tangible rather than just waving a card or saying, I transferred the money to you, especially at this age, especially because we don't see that. They see parents waving their cards, and it's like a magic wand. It's like, okay, I just wave it in front of the machine and I get whatever I want. They don't, especially at a younger age, they don't understand. And also, psychologically, it hurts when you pay cash. It hurts to spend. There's actually a physical, the physical pain in your brain. Actually, the same center in your brain lights up when you pay with cash as when you have physical pain. So it's a good thing for them to realize that if you want to control your spending, then you can actually spend with cash. So I hope this is a little more helpful than actually giving you a dollar amount with regard to an allowance.
Very, very, very helpful. And Ramzi, I want to know from your side, at what age would you give your children allowance?
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know yet. So just so for the audience to know, I have two daughters. One is 2 years, or not, she turns 2 years next month, and one is 5
and
months.
No debit card? That's shocking.
We're falling behind, yeah. So yeah, I don't know yet. I don't think there's also necessarily a specific or a right age. I think it also depends on like the child's maturity, what are they kind of also allowed and not allowed to do with it. So if they're going out with their friends at night alone, then of course they should have something that to use to pay for things. But if they're going to be with you the whole time, then it's a bit more challenging to do that, because then they're still going to be looking up to you. But I can see it starting as an early age. I don't know yet what that number is, because I don't know how quickly or slowly they do develop. But when you go into a toy shop, or when you go into somewhere and it's not something that they would normally be able to get, or normally you would get them, then you can teach them that concept of, okay, here's your weekly allowance. How many weeks now are you going to save to be able to buy this toy or do this experience that you want to do that we wouldn't normally do? And then so get them to think about this a little bit more. So you're saving towards a goal in the future. And so it's not necessarily about how much you're spending and what you're spending it on, and saving and then investing part of it, which will come at a later age. But at an early age, at least you can start with some of just like these more basic concepts. So you can do it as early as like maybe 5 or 7 or something like that. It's not going to be easy, but at least to get them to think about it a bit and understand the value of money.
Yeah, and if I could say something, they say a child's money habits are formed by the age of 7. So you could actually start teaching kids at the age, giving them talks about money, making them understand about money at that age, preliminary. But also maybe put in a condition, like would you allow your kids to drive if they didn't take driving classes? So why should they have an allowance if they haven't really gone through a class where they learn about money? I think it's a responsibility. I think it's good to link it through that. And it's one way of making them see their responsibility. It's, you're going to get power with your money, but you need to be responsible as well. So I think it's a great link you can form there as well.
I want to stop talking about parents for a bit, and maybe first of all ask the audience to drop any questions that they have in the Q&A chat for after the session. And we just launched the poll, so if you guys want to answer the questions just to get your personal feedback on that matter, please feel free to do so. So I think we've really attacked parents a lot in the first 25 minutes. I think it's or blame the parents on the education. But what about schools and universities, right? So let's take a bit of a step back and talk about this for a second. Most of the time, any kid will spend half of the day at school or university or whatever, like even more than at home with his parents. So really, schools and universities should play a bigger role in educating our children about the future of finance. So not the future of finance, but like the habits of money management. So according to both of you, are they doing a good job? Obviously not, but I mean, that's a rhetorical question. But But what can they do, and what kind of extra thing they can add to their curriculum to help the children?
Okay, well, firstly, I just want to take a step back and say this wasn't about attacking parents, mainly because we're all in the same boat. We made the same mistakes. I would hope parents would see this more as constructive guidance and in terms of what to avoid. But that being said, yes, I think schools have a big responsibility to play. I think they are perfectly poised to teach kids about this, and I think they should do it. I mean, I've gone through curriculums here, whether you're doing an MBA program, you can do a 3-year graduate degree in banking and finance here, and you will study everything under the sun, from tax law to compliance to every single thing. But there's not even a half an hour session there, not even a half an hour session on personal finance. And that is something that's really dangerous, because what tends to happen is kids who do programs like whether it's banking or finance or economics or corporate finance tend to think that this is, they tend to think that they know about this. It's the classic Dunning-Kruger effect, right? They have limited ability in a skill, but they then believe that they know more about it and therefore can make smarter decisions. So do you see what the danger is? They actually have less of a skill and they think they can make smarter money decisions, and that's where the danger lies. I think they should just start instituting this as soon as possible. Honestly, I don't know why it's taken so long. I find it hard to believe. It makes me angry. It makes me incredulous, actually, as to how in this day and age we can allow our education system, which is supposed to be innovative and all of the other terms that are being bandied around by the education industry, without teaching them something so basic. And I think that they should start sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I personally graduated in banking and finance and took all these courses that you just mentioned, and I never learned about personal management, finance management. And the kind of event that opened my eyes and triggered me to start managing my finance a bit more was actually the COVID crisis last year. So after 5 years of work experience, I found myself in a financial crisis situation, the first financial crisis situation that I've ever experienced, like in my career. And I saw a lot of people losing their jobs. Even some of my friends, were made redundant. So that really opened my eyes and, enabled me to start investing. This is where I started investing and saving aside and creating my safety net. So that was not thanks to university. That was not thanks to curriculum that was at school. And Ramzi, what kind of topic should, like, in which kind of field should schools and universities insert that? Should they, for example, create a separate kind of session on a weekly basis? Should it be once a year for young children, and then something more, that's come like more often later on? So how should it be structured?
So with schools, it's a bit trickier because you have kind of all the accreditation and certification and things like that. And so you have a very fixed curriculum and program that you have to do, especially if you want to maintain that. And kids these days, I don't know, Marilyn obviously can speak a lot more about it because her kids are older. I don't think they have a lot of time, additional free time between their coursework and homework and extracurricular activities and all these things. But it's something that should definitely be brought in at the school level. And it's surprising to me that it's not done additionally, because especially the private schools, most people who either own or operate or run these schools have kind of higher education, have done MBAs, are like relatively successful in doing these things. And so they should understand these concepts. If they don't, that's something different. But to bring it in, and they all know the shortcoming. What's more surprising to me is at the university and the MBA level, where it's much easier to bring this in to the curriculum. You can make it one mandatory course over your 4-year degree. Like, it doesn't need to be so onerous, but they can bring it in a lot easier. And it's not just saving and investing. It's even maybe here less important, but in other countries, it's how do you file your own income taxes on an annual basis. So like, nobody explains these things to you. Nobody teaches these things to you. And they're critical aspects of your life, not to get into debt, how to think about kind of buying your first house and taking a mortgage on that. What does it mean to have a mortgage on a house and a car loan and a student loan and all these things together? And so at the university level, it should be able to be done much more easily. And it is quite surprising that nobody has nobody has really done it, because similar to you, I majored in finance as undergrad. I did my MBA as well, and in neither did I learn these topics in particular. And actually, in my high school, so I went to the American School of Dubai, and my teachers were quite good, and they taught us business in general. And so I took like econ and things like that in high school as well. So I thought I knew more, and then obviously I realized I didn't, because I was learning how to run businesses and accounting and these kind of things from an early age, but I didn't know anything about managing my own personal finances really. And so when you go to university and suddenly you're on your own and you're independent and you have a credit card and you're just spending money, you all of a sudden realize you're like, oh, I spent a lot more than what I have. Now what do I do? And so I'm in trouble. And then mom and dad, how do I figure this out? Help me out. Hopefully it's nothing too serious, but
the bank of mom and dad. Yeah. Also, I guess it's helpful to point here that a lot of the schools or colleges or universities, when they do teach personal finance, or when they do attempt to teach it, they really make a hash of it, mainly because they teach it as a math-based skill. And personal finance is not a math-based skill. It's to do with the way you behave. It's to do with the way you think. It's to do with the way you feel. And they teach it as, if you had so much of money and you spend so much, that it isn't a math-based skill. They also, I don't know if any of you have seen the personal finance books that are going out in some of the schools in the UK or elsewhere in the world. I mean, I want to gouge my eyes out. It is so boring. It would just put you to sleep in a second. It's just the way that it is taught, So we have a two-pronged problem here. One is that the schools don't do it enough. And two, when they do it, they make it so boring, so mind-numbingly boring that you've lost the kids, that you've lost the teens. And you've lost them forever, because now they think personal finance, a workshop, program, seminar, no way am I going to be caught dead going for that. I know what that's about. And I had that feeling of like, oh my goodness, someone's going to come and lecture me about, we all have that thing. Someone's going to tell us what we have to do and tell us to be careful with our spending and our saving. I know all that. I know what to do. That's because of the way it's just been brought up. And if you do have a chance, look through some of the textbooks. I guarantee you're not going to go past page, or the first couple of pages, just because of the way that it is portrayed. And it doesn't have to be like that. It can be taught in a way that's interesting. It can be taught in a way that's relatable. It can be taught through stories. Children are hardwired to listen to stories. I think humans are hardwired to listen to stories. But when you go to them with worksheets and calculators and figures, you've lost them at hello. And I think that is a critical thing that we need to think about as well. So it's not just should schools and colleges do it, and some of them claim they're doing it, but how are they doing it? How well are they doing it? You see, if this was just any skill, I would say, it's okay as long as they're doing something. But this is a critical life skill. This is something that's going to affect every single aspect. It's something you're going to be tested on every single day of your adult life, right? Every day we make about 8 to 10 money decisions, and most of us do it with zero training in money. How can that be fair? How can that make sense? End of rant.
Consequence isn't a bad grade on a test either, or I'll repeat the course next semester. No. The consequence is it impacts my long-term financial viability. I will not be able to retire at the age that I want to retire, or I will not be able to sustain my lifestyle the way I want to beyond that, or I won't be able to provide for my kids' future needs, especially if it comes to paying for very expensive private universities and the likes, if you don't plan for it properly well in advance.
Yeah, but I think as kids as well, or as teenagers, and that's, I think, the mistake that they make with these textbooks and these, college curated courses. They start off with mortgages and pensions, and the kids are like, these kids can't think till next Friday. You want them to think of pensions and mortgages and long-term plans. It doesn't work that way. You cannot start off like that. You need to meet the kids where they are, which is, what is your current problem? What are the difficulties you're facing? What is it that you're looking forward most to in the next couple of years? What are your problems? The fact that you want to get a job, you want to get settled. These aren't the things that are tackled with most personal finance courses, which is surprising, because these are the problems that kids want to solve. I mean, money is the number one cause of stress for most teenagers and young adults, because they don't know this. They're unsure about jobs. The whole job situation is completely changing. We're moving, to a gig economy. It's no longer employment is guaranteed, or the employment rates are going up higher. These are the concerns. Learning about money will help them. but maybe we can link it to the concerns that they're already feeling instead of linking it to 30, 40 years down the line. Yes, those things are important to talk about, but maybe not to start off with. Sort of get them hooked in, get them at a low, and then they themselves realize, okay, I need to be a long-term planner. I need to think for the long term. But that's got to come from within. You can't sort of force it on them. I think it doesn't work so well, and that's what colleges and schools are doing, and that's why it's not really going well at all, unfortunately.
Well, thanks a lot for both of your inputs, and I can see how both of you are very enthusiastic about that specific topic. And just one more thing, actually, we talked about a lot about saving, right? But what about exposure to investing and the market itself, right? Is it a good idea to expose a teenager, or even like a young adult, to any kind of a brokerage account, or a wealth management company like StashAway, or the market in general? So is it a good idea? And if yes, what age will be the ideal age, and what kind of assets and instrument they should first look into?
Would you like me to go first?
Yeah, go for it, Marilyn. Yeah.
Okay, because I'm sure Ramzi has this answer down pat. So let me just give it. Okay, so I think it's really important. Investing at the end of the day is where the wealth creation is, right? You're not going to save your way to wealth. That is something that we need to understand. Investing is important, and I think we should start teaching kids about investing at 15. Why? Because it takes time to build that investing mindset. It takes time to teach them to think long term. It takes time for them to internalize that learning. But also, on the flip side, I think investing is like the roof of the house. You can't put the roof of a house without building strong walls and strong foundation. And that's one very common mistake I see with a lot of organizations over here, directly getting kids to invest. These kids have no idea about the difference between credit and debit. They don't know what an emergency fund is or how to fund it. They don't understand risk capital. They don't understand emergency funds. These are basics. This is the walls and the strong foundation I'm talking about. But once kids do understand that, then of course, then the cherry on the cake is investing. And I think that is the bringing it full circle. It is very, very important. I am a big fan of teaching kids how to invest, not so much trading. We don't do trading, but definitely investing for the long term. But the point is, in good time, they first need to have a little bit of financial education is a precursor to that. But once you get that precursor, then yes, invest as soon as possible, because rightly, most people start investing at the age of their mid-30s, early 40s, we've already lost out on 10, 15 years of time of compounding interest time, right? And it's very difficult to make that up, very, very difficult to make that up. Whereas if a kid starts investing at the legal age of 18, when they can be eligible to invest, I mean, it's so much easier. It's like cycling on a flat road instead of cycling uphill. It's just that much easier. And that's why I think it's really important to teach them. But it comes with a caveat here that you need to teach them first the basics of money management before stepping into investment. Investment is the cherry on the cake.
Yeah, so I'm fully aligned with that. And I think I agree that around 15 is the time that makes sense. And it's because of what you said about the time value of money, about the compounding effect. And it takes time for you to really see the impact and the value of what you're doing with your investments and your savings. So if you start at 15, by the time you're 18, that nominal amount, whatever it is, and however that much that is for it's going to be different for different people, whether it's $10 a month, $100 a month, it doesn't matter what the amount is. But whatever you start with, after 3 years of doing that, if also it's invested properly, and it doesn't need to be in that teenager's kind of own proprietary account. It can be done through a parent sub account or whatever it is. Yeah. But then by the time they're 18, they can see, oh, wow, this is really the impact and this is really the benefit. And that's what's most eye-opening from them, because then they can experience it firsthand. But like you said, you need to have the basics down first. They need to understand it at the beginning, the basics of finance before they even think about investing. But once you see the impact, then that's where the real value is in. And to your comment, Joseph, about trading versus other kind of wealth management or other instruments. So if you're interested in trading, then of course, by all means, no one should stop you from learning more about that. But this is part of the education. So trading, day trading, trying to buy low, sell high, game the system, find these loopholes, arbitrage, whatever it is really not easy. And vast majority of kind of fund managers tend to lose money on this or underperform their same risk benchmarks. So this is something that's more complex that needs to be taught as well. But
which is never taught in any trading class. I guarantee that.
Exactly. But the concept of kind of that passive long-term investment strategy, that's really what's going to move the needle and make a difference in most people's lives. Because even if you do like it, even if you are good at it, by the time you're an adult or going to university or whatever it is, you likely won't have the time that's needed to be able to do it and do it well on a consistent basis.
What about cryptocurrency? I mean, it's the hot subject on everybody's conversation, and especially for the teenagers. I mean, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, whatever. Is it a good asset for a teenager to be exposed to and maybe start investing in it? Since, I mean, it is, everybody say it's going to be the currency of the future, and they are teenagers, so the future for them might be Bitcoin. So we never know. Is it worth it for them to start from at that age?
Well, it depends. Does this teenager have any credit card debt? Does this teenager have an emergency fund? Does this teenager, is he investing his risk capital only? I have a ton of questions before they can answer that particular one, you see. And because all of this is a checklist to, do you understand what you're doing? I don't think there's any investment which is right or wrong. It's just, do you know what you're doing? Do you understand what you're doing? And the problem happens when the kids or the teenagers don't understand what they're doing, like with the tragic case of Alex Kearns that happened, on the Robinhood platform. And by his own admission, he had no idea what he was doing. On his suicide note, that's what he wrote. And that's the scary part. You're just doing it because it's the thing to do, because everyone's talking about it, because the Kardashians are talking about it. I mean, even the fact that it's in the news today that the teenagers are now taking financial advice from influencers but you have to understand what a problem it is, because they're not getting it anywhere else. This is something they want to learn about, and the only people talking about it are people who are making money off them. And it's such a dangerous game we are playing with our kids, and there can't be a good ending to the story. I think the sooner we realize that, the sooner we take some concrete steps to actually stop that. There's nothing wrong with cryptocurrency, but are you doing it in the right way? Do you understand what you're doing? What's your exposure to it? What's the downside? They don't understand this. Everyone wants to invest in cryptocurrency, but they don't understand anything about. I've yet to come across anybody who can explain to me coherently what exactly it is.
And 100%.
Though they want to invest in it, and they might have invested in it, but they cannot for the life of them explain what exactly it is.
Absolutely.
So the way I see it is, it's an opportunity, because yes, it probably does have a big future kind of in the financial ecosystem in some way, shape or form, and it's constantly evolving. But the fact that they're expressing interest in it, maybe it's driven by the potential to make these outsized returns. But then you can use it as an opportunity to teach and to educate. Say, okay, you want to invest in crypto? That's fine. But before that, let's cover the basics. Show me that you understand
exactly the
all of these other things. Yeah. Execute, do it, and then we'll give you some exposure to it, and you can invest some small amount in it. Understanding, and I like the terms that you use. So it's risk is a big element of it, and that's one of the things that at StashAway is extremely important, right? So you shouldn't be investing based on an expected return or a return that you want to achieve or would like to achieve. You invest based on your personal risk appetite and what you're comfortable taking in terms of risk, because there's no such thing as a guarantee in any investment. Your money can go up, your investments can go up, and your investments can go down. What's the real test is, how comfortable are you when, and what will you do when it does go down? And that's also a good lesson to learn early on as a younger teenager as well. So giving them part of that portfolio exposure to crypto and saying, okay, you put $100, now the $100 is suddenly worth $40. Are you happy? What are you going to do with that? What does that mean for you psychologically? Do you want to sell? Do you want to get out? Are you going to wait for the long run? Are you going to double down? And then you can get into a lot more kind of then complex lessons and complex concepts. So there's a lot of opportunity to use, in my opinion, for education. So as a parent, I wouldn't say no to these things. You can put a lot of kind of conditions on, if you want to do this, then these are the other things that we have to do first. And then once you do it, it also doesn't end there. Then the lessons can also kind of continue. And it's for their benefit at the end of the day. It's not stopping them from doing something or pursuing something they're passionate about or interested in. It's building their
speculation is human nature,
building their understanding, their knowledge, their confidence, so that they can then take better decisions in the future.
100%. I fully agree with that. And when you shouldn't be investing, first of all, I in my personal opinion, right, in something that at least the kid shouldn't be very much exposed to a very volatile asset unless with parent supervision. He should be always supervised with his parent, and always trade with the money that you have. So don't never go on leverage. Compounding interest. So keep on investing more and more and more for that dollar cost averaging for the long run. And this is what I want to end with right now. And the question for you, Ramsey, is how can StashAway can help parents secure their children's education for the long run?
Yeah, so other than obviously the education tools and these kind of webinars and seminars that we do with our guest hosts like Marilyn to teach and educate, which is, I think, the most important part. The other things that at least part of the StashAway platform. So we believe, like I've been talking about, so a risk-based approach, thinking about the long term, being much more passive as opposed to the day trading. And so we have one thing called goal-based investing, and you can access it. It's free to use. You just need to register. You don't need to commit any capital to it. There's no fees or costs associated. And then it'll tell you or guide you actually for education specifically as one of the examples. If you don't know how much you need to save and when, it'll guide you with certain questions to get you to that answer. And so if you need, I'm just making things up, in 15 years, you need to have $200,000 to send your kid to Harvard or Wharton or Yale or whatever it is. How much do you then need to save on a monthly basis starting today at that risk level that makes sense for you, which is different for each person? And then you can see how realistic or not is that and how much time you actually need to be able to achieve it. So the first piece is it's knowledge at the end of the day. So the more you know, the more information you have, the more you're able to prepare in advance as well for this. And one thing to also note is that with your child's education, as much as we want the best for all of them, and the best means different things to different people, if you can't necessarily afford the best for your child's education, that's okay, because you always have alternatives that you can do. You can take out a loan, they can take out a loan, you can go to a more affordable university, they can take a job at university to supplement the cost of things. So there's lots of different options that are available to you. Whereas when it comes to your own personal finances, especially when it comes to retirement, you don't really have a lot of alternatives, and you don't want to end up relying on your children to pay for your finances as well. So this is more about kind of like financial education for children and for parents, but you should be careful not to prioritize your children too much over also your own long-term needs. You need to be looking at both together and then making an informed trade-off if that situation does arise. Definitely agree with that.
Thanks, Ramsey. I want to use the last 10 minutes to go through the Q&As. There are some questions in the chat. For that, I want to thank both of you for the amazing input that you guys provided today. And Marilyn, how can the audience reach out to you if they have any kind of questions?
Well, they can get to our website, KFI.global, and book a discovery call with me, or just sort of put in an inquiry form. But KFI.global is the website, and we have an option there to just book a discovery call in case there's anything that I can help them with, or they'd like to see if any of our programs would be a good fit for their kids, or even just advice on how we can help them.
Thanks a lot, Marilyn. And from our side, obviously you can always contact our customer support line. We're more than happy to assist you with any question that you have. And for all the attendees that attended the session, we'd like to offer you a promo code to start an educational fund for your children on StashAway. So please do reach out to us, and we'll apply the code to your account. So I'll kick things off with the Q&A. There's a couple of questions. First question from Justin. I completely understand where you're coming from with regards to the use of cash and training them with cash. However, don't you agree it's so hard today? Most of the things that our children are doing are online, and all payments are digital. How can we train them on this?
I do agree it's hard. I didn't say it was easy, particularly hard in today's day and time. I'm saying try, do the best, just because I know it makes a difference. I know there's actually research to prove that cash, you tend to spend less when you have cash. This is true of adults and it's true of kids. But I guess another thing that we can do is sort of, we have to understand that kids are more attached to their own money than they are to yours. When I take my kids stationery shopping, they love to go stationery shopping. I don't know, it's just a thing with them. We'd go, and when they knew I was paying for it, they'd just dump stuff in the basket without even thinking of it. But when I gave them their own money, it might have been the same amount. I said, this is yours. You decide how you want to spend it. Suddenly they were thinking, they were discussing and wondering, do we have this at home? Do we need another one? If we buy one, can we share it? And then they came to me and said, I think the store, at this, the store at Kinokuniya is really expensive. Can we go to another one? Like, it never struck you when I was paying the bill for that. But it just goes to prove that kids are more attached to their own money than they are to yours. So even just making that demarcation and saying, this is what you can spend and this is yours, will make a big difference. I hope that helps in some way, but I do understand that, yes, digital payments are here, but we can always try.
Ramsey, do you want to give your input on this?
Yeah. So of course, it's easier to use cash because it has that impact. It's much more instant. Whereas with digital payments, you don't really feel it's just kind of happening, like Marilyn was talking before. But at the same time, digital payments are more and more common, and we're not going to get away from it becoming the future. I mean, now it's credit cards. It's becoming a lot more Apple Pay in the future. I don't know. I can't speculate on what it's going to evolve beyond that, honestly. But that is the reality, and that is the future. And so you need to also teach them about that and how to use that and how to deal with that as well. So maybe at a younger age, starting with cash, just so that they can really grasp that concept, because the younger you are, obviously your brain and everything is still developing. And so things need to be a lot more clear. But once you're a teenager, once you're in university, then this is just the way you're going to be doing things. And so if the best way is to use a budgeting app to track it, if you're not diligent about yourself and keeping track, then fine, then that might be the right answer. But you need to be kind of educated on the best way to use that and the best way that makes sense for you. And for each person, it's also going to be a little bit different. Some people like to, whatever, at the end of the month, they withdraw a certain amount and they put it in cash in an envelope and they say, no, this is how much I'm saving. And then they invest it in another way. Other people just rely on these other apps to do things. I personally, every couple of days, I go back through my SMSs and I keep a physical log in an Excel to show how much I'm spending and on what. So at least I can see the categories and how it's kind of evolved. So each thing is different. Things work for different people, but the reality is online and digital payments are going to be more the norm. And so you need to adapt to that.
100%. And actually, you don't need cards anymore to pay, right? Or technically speaking. But for example, yesterday, Carrefour has launched a new...
You just walk in and out with your phone.
Yeah, it's convenient and it's awesome, but it's also scary because
very scary.
You're not even seeing at the end of the session, how much am I actually paying? Even if it's not my credit card, you don't know how much you're paying. You're just walking out.
Well, you can track it from the application. It does show you that, but like there's no like contact with payments, right? It's not that you're putting your phone or like your credit card for giving cash, just walking out. So that's the future. And I mean, the future is, for me, is bright and great.
Joseph, there's a question actually here. I was wondering if we could take that from Sandra. She says, I think it's pretty pertinent. I'd like to address that if I may. What if my finances as a parent are a mess? How do I deal with this chat with my kids? I think that's a really, it's a very, very vulnerable question. If I could answer that, I would say that, talking to kids is I don't know how old your kids are, Sandra. That would really help if I knew that, but I'm considering you're already thinking of talking about them. I'm guessing they are already teenagers. And a lot of times I get, just because our finances are a mess shouldn't stop us from telling our kids what to do with regard to money. And I think being honest about it and telling them, showing them our mistakes and telling them what mistakes we made is a very, very powerful learning. I mean, those stories are the ones that kids actually learn from. So use it as a teaching tool, because it is a very, very powerful teaching tool. Because I can guarantee you, when you get into the details with your kids, they will never repeat that mistake because they would know how much pain it has caused. They know what mistakes to avoid. And I think coming from you as a mom, it would make a really big difference to them.
Thanks a lot, Marilyn. Will, it's less of a question, more as a statement. A great discussion. Kids need knowledge on topics mentioned, but also need help, encouragement, to be patient, in a word of instant gratification. I 100% agree with that. They do need patience.
Will is nice to have you here and see you here, Will. I mean, he is a professional and teaches kids as well with regard to money. So honored to have you on come and listen to us.
Thanks for joining us, Will. So there are two questions that are similar, and we'd like to end on that, but I will rephrase it myself. So according to both of you, what are the key takeaways from today's session? So what is the best way for someone or a parent to educate their children on? So where should they start, basically? What's the step number one, and what are the key takeaways of today's session?
Well, I think the key takeaways and what they should start is first, don't delude yourself that somebody else is going to solve this problem for you. Not the schools, not colleges. It's not going to happen. And if it does, it's just going to take too long, and it might just be expensive. And also, your kids aren't going to figure this out on their own. We think they might, but they're not going to. They might, but it will cost them a lot in terms of time and money, and we don't want that to happen. So I think taking responsibility and acknowledging that this is our problem, and then we can take concrete steps to solve it, makes us actually feel empowered, because the steps you take today, can dramatically affect your child's financial future. And I think that's something that is really good to know, that something that you can do today is really going to make a huge difference to your child's life. The second thing I would like to say is that this isn't somebody's opinion. There's empirical evidence to back this, that kids who take a course in financial education are less likely to be compulsive buyers, more likely to save, less likely to max out their credit cards. There is actual research to prove that just even 10 hours of a financial education program can dramatically affect a child's spending and saving habits. We have the research. What more are we waiting for? And the other thing I would say is, to end on, is an early start. Don't ignore the value of an early start. The earlier you start, the more time, the easier it is for the kid. For one, it's just like a language. If you have kids at 17 learning a new language, or a kids at 9 or 7, or the younger they are, they learn it better. They learn it faster. They speak it without an accent. I think money is just another kind of language, and the younger they learn it, the better they are at it. It becomes more impactful. They get to internalize it more. Also remember, especially for teenagers, this is the time where their brains are at their most powerful. Their cognitive abilities are never as high as they're going to be when they're teenagers. What better time is it for us to teach them something as critical as learning how to manage their finances properly?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Fully agreed. Thanks a lot, Marilyn, and thanks for being here. For me, I would say it's similar. So start early. I think that's the most important thing. Start with the basics. Don't kind of overwhelm and overcomplicate things as well. Take things in a timely order. And whatever you do it where it's something that they can kind of feel, see the impact as well. So even if the impact is going to happen over a few years' time, like we talked about, the impact of kind of saving and investing, do that. And the earlier you do that, the more beneficial it is going to be. And I want to say also, kind of, don't be afraid to be vulnerable with your kids. So share your losses, share your learnings, share what didn't work, because they also need to see that investing isn't a one-way kind of line up. It's up and down for literally every single person, no matter how successful they are. So you're going to make money, you're going to lose money. The most important thing at the end of the day is to learn. And as long as you're learning and adapting your behaviors based on those learnings, then you're definitely ahead of the curve.
Right. Thanks a lot, Ramzi, for the input. And actually, thanks for both of you for today's session. We're 1 minute past 7 p.m. UAE time. Apologies about that. Just want to end on a quick note that our next Money Chat series will actually be an in-person Money Chat series in the DIFC. With some DIFC representatives as well, talking about the future of the fintechs in the MENA region. So if you'd like to join that session, please feel free to register on Eventbrite, on our page on Eventbrite, and I hope to see you there in person. It's also being, broadcasted live on air, since it's a show, of course, and on Zoom and on live on Facebook. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening, and hope to see you very soon. Goodbye.
Yeah. Thanks, Ramzi. Thanks, Joseph.